I'm still talking to Talk's international editor, Isabel Oakeshott. Isabel, before we move on to Kemi Badenoch, I'll get him on a bit later, but Craig from Yorkshire has phoned in and reminded me, and probably you as well, lest we forget, I think one of the reasons that the people at Southport detest Keir Starmer is after his sort of faux crocodile tears, very briefly laying a wreath on the pavement outside that dance hall where the horror happened, and then refusing to talk to anyone and then leaving, he flew straight back to London to host a celebrity party, champagne flowing, with the good and the great and the famous and the showbiz stars at number 10 Downing Street to celebrate his victory in the election. So they know that and they don't like it. I don't like it either, do you?
I mean, there's nothing to celebrate now, is there? I mean, when historians come to write up this disastrous period in our history, they will point to Southport as the moment that Keir Starmer's premiership unravelled. And here's the irony, he'd only just entered number 10 when this happened. It started unravelling within a couple of weeks of him actually taking the job. And unfortunately, we're still saddled with the man and his woeful cabinet, potentially for another 4 years. And I tell you what, the country is in the mood for a revolution.
It really is.
Just wondering how on earth we can get one sooner than later.
Yeah, he because of his own incompetence, his own uselessness, and frankly, his sneaky lying antics, he enjoyed the shortest political honeymoon period known to man in political history. So yeah, as you say, 2 weeks and everybody hated him, and it's his own fault. He's the architect of his own downfall. But as you also point out, he's still the Prime Minister and will be for four. Well, he maybe not, but that lot will be wrecking the country for the next 4 years. After which, well, a number of people might be hoping to take over. One, of course, would be Reform UK, but principally, I would have thought the leader of the Tory party, Kemi Badenoch, has got eyes on that job. She, I think, is still wedded to the two-party system. Doesn't matter about anything else, you know. The British people will only ever vote Labour or Tory, so we don't really have to worry. That was her policy from the moment she got the job. In fact, she made a point of saying, well, you know, don't expect me to announce any policies for a couple of years. There's no real point, is there? I mean, I won't be in power for 4 years, so I won't be boring you with policies. Anyway, you know and I know that her shadow cabinet have been going, Kemi, we need some policies. And so she's completely U-turned on her 2-year pledge and has now announced a potential crackdown on migrants who claim benefits and an extension from 5 to 10 years before foreigners are allowed permanent residency status. Jobless and low-paid migrants would also be barred from settling in Britain indefinitely. You know, this is all okay. It's okay, but it's dancing around the edges. And in the end, she'll stay in the ECHR. She's made a point of it. She said she doesn't want to leave the European Court of Human Rights. If you don't leave the European Court of Human Rights, you will always have a migrant crisis. Nigel Farage knows that. Even Robert Jenrick knows that. Certain members of her party know that, but she doesn't. She'll stay in the ECHR. Nigel will go, we're coming straight out. He wins. She loses. This is dancing around the edge. Actually, a complete show of panicked desperation on her part is my take on it. Your thoughts?
It is completely that, and no wonder she is in a panic. I mean, polls today show quite remarkably Reform actually ahead of the pack, 4 points ahead of Labour and many, many more points ahead of the Conservatives. And yeah, sure, there's years to go, but this is a momentum that Reform has, which is terrifying for the Tories. And the hemorrhaging of money from the Conservative Party is a real practical issue for them. And I've heard from more than one source that they are struggling to pay the rent on Conservative campaign headquarters, CCHQ, on Matthew Parker Street in swanky SW1, which does beg the question, if they're going to be evicted or seeking more lowly accommodation. I was thinking perhaps an industrial estate in Slough might be more suited to their budget. Maybe Reform should take over CCHQ and actually really get its tanks onto the Tory lawn. But that aside, the problem, among many problems that Kemi Badenoch has got, is that good opposition parties want nothing more than to be in power so that they can enact their brilliant ideas. Here's the problem with Kemi. Just a few months ago, she and her party were in power, and they had been in power for 14 years. They had all those opportunities of all those years to do what she has announced today. Did they do it? No. So why on earth would anyone trust them now after those 14 years that suddenly they've had some kind of real change of heart and they're actually going to do these things? People don't want to hear it. They're not listening because those guys had 14 years to get on top of immigration, whether legal or illegal, and they did the precise opposite.
Absolutely right. She's made a sort of slight apology for that, but not enough of an apology. I mean, the Tories lied to us for 14 years. Their crimes in terms of the migrant crisis towards the end were absolutely heinous, you know, not telling us that they were letting in 1,100,000 legal migrants every single year. They didn't tell us that. And when we found out, they go, oh, yeah, well, you know, bit of a mistake. Well, they do not seem to understand the depth of feeling that people have about that. And time and time again, we get them phoning here all the time. I see it in the papers. I hear it on the TV. The people of Britain, I think it's likely they will never forgive the Tories for that. And Kemi, in her timid way, is sort of trying to address that here. But as I said at the outset, Isabel, this is just messing around the edges, isn't it?
This is no time for timidity. This is a time for Donald Trump-style boldness. That is what the scale of the crisis in our country demands. So announcing little trifling little things like this, which would have actually had some impact, you know, if they'd actually done it a year ago, just isn't really going to touch the sides of the problem. And you know, when you say that people will never forgive the Tory betrayal, they're right never to forgive the Tory betrayal. And I'll tell you why, because what the Tories allowed to happen is not reversible. You know, when a party like the Lib Dems do a massive betrayal, like as with tuition fees, that is reversible by a future government. You can just change the policy on tuition fees. You can't undo the importing of millions and millions of people. We can't just deport literally millions of people. They have transformed our country for the worse. They have, many would argue that they have absolutely ruined the United Kingdom, and it is going to take a hell of a lot of work to repair that damage, and we're not going to be able to turn back the clock. So for that reason, I'm afraid the Conservatives should never be forgiven, and I don't think they will be.
I absolutely agree with you, Isabel. I think they've cooked their goose and there's no going back. One last point. I think she's really bad in PMQ's, Prime Minister's Question Time as well, partly because she's one of these politicians, one of these Westminster bubble gang types who likes to sort of demean other politicians. Not a serious politician. That's not serious. That's not serious. And most of the things they say are not serious are the issues that concern the public. Now, what she should have been doing over the last week or so is going at Keir Starmer hell for leather on these voice coach sessions, breaking the lockdown, which she clearly did. Instead, all we got was one very, very small mention yesterday at PMQs when she very unwisely wisely began her attack, her 6 questions. First question was about the Chagos Islands. Now, what's going on with the Chagos Islands is a national disgrace, an international disgrace, in fact. A bunch of left-wing North London lawyers trying to dismantle British colonialism and sacrificing Britain's influence and power on the world stage along the way because they just hate imperialism. That guy, Richard Hermer, Lord Hermer, get him out of that job. He's a danger to this nation. But she starts off going, oh, Chagos Islands, you're giving away there. I mean, I agree with the sentiment. But Keir Starmer, you know, in a rare victorious moment during these debates, because he's not very good on his feet either, just turns around and says, well, you lot started it. James Cleverly began the negotiations to give away the Chagos Islands. So in other words, it wasn't the smartest tactic to go at Starmer about the Chagos. I mean, politics is a dirty game and you've got to play it cleverly. She doesn't.
Well, actually, I agree with some of what you said and disagree with some of it. She started off on the Chagos and that was the right subject to go on, but she wasn't sufficiently briefed to follow through. She then pivoted to a completely random topic. I mean, she was bang on the money with the Chagos Islands. People are hopping mad about that. But she allowed herself to be derailed by Starmer talking in some weird, cryptic way about how she should know because those in the know that there's a secret reason why we have to give away the Chagos, but he can't tell us what it is. And if, you know, nod, nod, wink, wink, you must know, basically hinting that it's some national security thing that the rest of us are too lowly and stupid to be trusted with that information. She just let that one ride. Yeah. You should just let him say it and then moved on to another topic.
Yeah.
I was there thinking, well, hang on a minute. How about you stand up to him and say, I'm not having any of that on behalf of the British voter. I'm not having any of your nod, nod, wink, wink. Tell us what it is that means that we have to give away these islands and not only give them away, but give away 18 billion pounds potentially, which is almost as much as your mythical financial black hole.
Yeah, exactly. She should have said, well, wait a minute, Prime Minister, are you telling the Commons and by extension the people of this country that you're keeping some sort of secret about this very important national negotiation over the Chagos Islands? But I think that his suggestion there's a secret is a crock of crap. This is a bunch of left-wing lawyers who can't stand the idea of British imperialism, our colonial history, and that guy, Richard Hermer, who should not be anywhere near the Attorney General's job, is just determined to dismantle as much of British power and influence around the world as he possibly can because, like Keir Starmer, he hates this country.